Imaginaries come from square rooting a negative number. They are an answer to what happens if you have radical -4, for example. We know 2 times 2 does not equal 4, and -2 times -2 also does not equal 4. So when we look at this and we're thinking what number times itself is -4, we are stuck because there is no real number. So what mathematicians have done is they have said, they've defined that I, we're going to call I this imaginary number, and it is equal to radical -1, which again, radical -1, likewise, there is no number times itself is -1. So we call it imaginary. They could have chosen a different name, but they chose imaginary. So how this works, let's say we're trying to simplify radical -4. Instead of saying it's not possible, or no solution, or undefined, what we do is we say this is equivalent to radical -1 times regular 4. In doing so, this radical -1 we can just write as I, and then radical 4, well, we can do that. Radical 4 is 2. So we can say this is I times 2, or 2I. So the square root of -4 isn't 2 or -2, but it's 2 times I, the imaginary number. Okay, so let's look at another problem, and you'll see these are basically the same exact process as simplifying regular radicals. It's just if you ever see that if you ever see a negative under the radical, you put an I in front of the radical and work the radical as if it was not negative. So, for example, radical -108. Immediately, I see that negative under the radical. That's no good. It's not possible in real numbers. So what we do is the negative comes out in the form of I. It's I times radical regular 108. And then we would factor 108 like we've factored everything. So I'm going to do a quick factor tree. 4, that's 9 times 6, 3, and 3. That's 3 and 2. So this would factor into I times, there's one pair of numbers, there's a second pair of numbers. So that's 3 times 2 times, and just 1 3 left over. So that would be 6 times I times radical 3. It's common notation to put the imaginary number in between the real number and the radical number. So again, you simplify this just like you simplified other radicals, but whenever you see that negative, you just write it as I times the regular radical, or the non-negative radical. All right, let's look at one more. So if we have radical -25, again, the immediate reaction, let's take that negative out and just call it I. So it's an imaginary radical 25. And radical 25, hopefully we don't have to make a tree for that, and we know that that's just 5. So this would be 5 times I, or 5I. Okay, so why don't you pause and try this one? Just a radical -72. All right, that should reduce to 6I root